Good morning, everyone. It is my privilege to welcome all of you in the sanctuary and those at home on Zoom to the service of Summit Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. I'm Rin Corbet, and today we welcome again our friend Reverend Luna Broussard to help bring us into this happy and new year. This new opportunity to open our minds, to love with our hearts, to help with our hands. We are recording today's service, and we'll turn it off for our community gathering afterwards. Now let's center ourselves as we listen to Barbara's musical prelude.
From Ernst von Dachniani's Winterreigen, which means winter round dances. And he wrote these in 1905. He was, in the spirit of New Year's and thinking about old friends. This is something he wrote for his friends, commemorating, I think, what must have been a very splendid party. And he wrote a prelude and a postlude, and in between were 8 individual pieces, each one to a different friend. And this one is to his friend Jan, and it's called Valse Aimable. And when I looked that up, it said kind. So I think this must have been a very kind friend.
Thank you, Barbara. Summit is a fellowship that welcomes all people. We favor orthodoxy over orthopraxy. I'm sorry, we favor orthopraxy. Good, you are awake. We favor orthopraxy over orthodoxy, correct action over correct belief. We welcome those on the political left and right, red and blue, liberal and conservative. We welcome those of all sexual and gender identities. Our hope, our aspiration, that you be loving and caring to all. We do aspire to the shared principles intentionally drawn from world religions, humanist teachings, nature, science, philosophy, music, and personal practices. The mission of Summit is to commit ourselves to building a more compassionate, just, and sustainable world. We have some announcements this morning. Nancy and Joanne, would you like to come up?
Happy New Year, everyone. Our theme is back in the swing. Thank you, Tyler, for coming up with that very fun theme. So we're only 2 weeks away from the start of online bidding and 3 weeks away from the live auction. The excitement of live bidding is back. The silent auction is back. The suspense of waiting to hear your raffle ticket number called is back. Enjoy getting together in person again. Indulge in savory light refreshments and sweet desserts. Get in the mood with swing music. Thank you, Mark. And the bar will be open. Plan to join us, please, for the fun at Summit's auction on Saturday, January 21st. Here at Summit. And now for the serious stuff. And now for the serious stuff. Not loud. And now for the serious stuff. Please bring your donations to the Summit office no later than January 17th during office hours, and also email photos of your items that you donated. To the address it's on the donation form, but it's summitUUauction23@gmail.com. See you all there.
Thank you. Thank you, Nancy. Joanne? In our land acknowledgement today, it is important, amidst our celebration of this new year, that we also acknowledge our sadness. 133 years ago and 3 days, soldiers of the United States, in a horribly tragic event, massacred 300 Lakota men, women, and children on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota. This was following a botched attempt to disarm them. 25 soldiers also died and 39 were wounded. 20 soldiers were awarded the Medal of Honor. In 1990, both houses of the US Congress passed a resolution on the historical centennial, formally expressing deep regret for the massacre. For more than 10,000 years, the Kumeyaay people lived in harmony with this land. Fishers and hunters, farmers, chemists, astrologers, marine biologists, we acknowledge our fellowship resides on unceded land, which continues to be home to the Kumeyaay people. Reverend Luna Jensen Broussard grew up in Copenhagen, Denmark, lived in Iraq for 7 years, and has served churches in many US states before retiring to San Diego, where her son's family lives. Luna holds a degree in psychology and a Master of Fine Arts from Louisiana State University, as well as a Master of Divinity from Meadville Lombard Theological School. We welcome Reverend Broussard as she introduces our gathering hymn.
And I need to hold this.
Yes, please.
This one, the other one doesn't work. Can you hear me?
Sure.
Oh, wonderful. I always love coming back here. I'm very lucky to be here with you on this, the very first day of the year. I want to introduce the hymn because you're going, oh, haven't we had enough Christmas, for heaven's sake? Well, maybe you have. We probably have, some of us who celebrate that. But this hymn is very special, and I'm going to talk about it later in my sermon. Not the only thing I'm going to talk about, of course. This hymn was written by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. I mean the lyrics. He wrote the lyrics as a poem. He wrote it in 1863, when the country was in a civil war. He wrote it 2 years after he lost his wife of 18 years. He wrote it after his son had enlisted against his will and was nearly paralyzed. He wrote it in darkness, but he found something. And that's what matters about this hymn. Now, I will speak more about it in the sermon a little bit. And oh, and by the way, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow was a Unitarian. Yeah. Let's not forget that. I do want to say that, like many hymns, this one too has lots of tunes. And if you read notes, we are not going to use the one in the hymnal. We're going to use the words, which will also be behind me, but we're going to use a more familiar tune. So here we go.
I'll do the intro one more time.
We light this chalice on the brink of a new year, letting go of what has been, open and hopeful for what may come, renewed, restored, ready to live fully and maybe move forward with intention. So be it.
Now let's rise and sing our UU hymn and then recite our aspiration. May love be the spirit of this fellowship. May the quest for truth be its sacrifice, and service be its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, and have another in fellowship. This is our aspiration.
Hi, Summit, it's Mary, and I have a story to share with you today. I am currently up at Camp de Benneville Pines when you're watching this. So I wanted to make one in the snow, but I wasn't sure if I could get it uploaded to you in time. So I'm doing it right here, leaning against this beautiful pine tree in my yard. So today I want to talk to you about a new theme. You know, we're doing theme-based months. And last month for December, our theme was wonder. And this month for January, our new theme is finding your center. Or finding our center. So I thought I'd start by looking for my center. And I'm not sure where my center is. Where do you think your center is? Is the center of our body like right here where our belly button is? Is that our center? Or is it something different? So you can look at our physical center, which might be your belly button, or that general area. Or maybe you feel like your center is somewhere up here in your brain, or maybe it's in your heart. It could be different for all of us, and that's okay, right? Because we're all different, unique individuals. But how about finding our center? So this is an invitation as a community, or as being an invitation to be in community together while finding our center. So, best way to do that is sort of start with yourself. Like, where do you feel most centered, calm, grounded? Where does covenant, you know, leaning into our 8 principles, where does that guide us? That's a little harder, isn't it? How do we center as a community? Like right now, we are a community of many people working together to create this faith community. You know, I run the program for our families and our children and our youth, and I'm currently up working with youth at Camp de Benneville Pines. And I work on services and all kinds of things that happen. And there's so many other people who do the same. You know, we have people who organize these services every Sunday. We get to have a different speaker each week. Sometimes it's a minister, like today with Reverend Luna, and sometimes it's a guest speaker. So we have a lot of variety. And then we have our amazing Sunday services team that take turns researching and contacting and putting together the services. They help us to center in these. So this 1 hour of Sunday morning, you have Sunday services committee, you have the RE program, we have the people who are running the audio visual and the sound and the Zoom, and so many folks Like if you really thought about how many folks that went into making this one service, so many folks come together to create this one experience, this 1 hour, where we're all together finding our center for just an hour, whether we're here physically, virtually, or asynchronistically. So finding our center. So think about that. What does that mean? How do we continue to find our center? We center on Sunday mornings, obviously, but there's other times that folks at Summit center, like when you open the newsletter, when you read an email, or when like the different groups, the men's group, the women's group, the social justice and action group get together, when we support the shelter and have share our space with the Interfaith Shelter. There's all kinds of wonderful ways that we come together and center into work and center into community. And have you experienced that? How does it feel? How does it feel? So today in RE is our game day. We always do game day the first Sunday of the month for a couple reasons. Usually, one, I'm up at camp, so it's a lot easier on volunteers who are helping to support the program to do game day. And it's also a great way to start the beginning of the year. So I encourage you to think about where your center is. That's not necessarily physical. It's a lot of times it's just a feeling, and that's fine. And if you have a hard time finding your center, think about where you feel centered when you're at Summit. Like, where do you feel centered? You feel centered in the service? That's wonderful. Like, I feel like I'm part of this community when I'm in service. And maybe it's different. That's okay. So one of the ways I like to find my center is I love leaning against a tree, which is why I did this out here. This is my pine tree. It's a big pine tree. And in the springtime, I hear owls nesting up here. We have a great horned owl family that nests up there, and I can hear them hoot. They could be up there now. I don't know. They hide really well during the daytime hours. But find a spot where you feel centered and find your center. And once you find your center, or thereabouts, it's easy to connect with others. It's easier, I should say, to connect with others. So I hope you enjoy exploring this theme this month. I know I've been thinking about, what does that mean? What does that mean? And you know what? At the end of the month, we might not have a perfect definition. Well, that's okay, because we're all figuring it out. And that's really the work, is figuring it out together in a beloved community and encouraging others to join us for the adventure. So I hope you enjoyed my story. And now, since I'm not there, I'm going to lead the children's affirmation via video. So join along if you remember it. And I only have one hand because I'm holding my camera with the other. So we are Unitarian Universalists, a people of open minds, loving hearts, and helping hands. And now, children and youth, you're welcome to go back to RE for game day with Michelle. And I will see you all next Sunday. Bye-bye.
We human beings mark time. We do so because we need it. We need moments in our lives where we stop and we take a bit of stock. Where are we? What has happened? Where would we like to be? So New Year is such a chance. So I invite you to enter with me into a spirit of prayer or meditation and ponder this question. What do I have to celebrate that happened last year? Sometimes we focus far too much on what we didn't do or what didn't happen or what was wrong. And God knows there's enough in the world that's wrong, scary and all that. But instead of going forward with a New Year's resolution, which sort of, honestly, those of us who are a little bit older, we know that's not going to really work usually. Give them up after a while. Instead of that, Let's celebrate. Focus on celebrating what's right about you, what's good about you, what's joyous about us, this world. Focus on celebration this year. We need it, all of us. The world is hard enough. Fate is hard enough sometimes. Let us focus on what's right and good within each of us, in this congregation, in the community, in the world. This year, let us celebrate and honor all of that. Amen.
Now it's time for our responsive reading, which is found in your order of service, number 544, New Year's Day. And this was by Kathleen McTeague. I'll read the first text, and if you all would respond with the italics. New Year's Day. The 1st of January is another day dawning, the sun rising as the sun always rises, the earth moving in its rhythms, with or without our calendars, to name a certain day at the dawn of new beginning, separating the old from the new. So it is. Everything is the same, bound into its history as we ourselves are bound.
The new year is something still unborn, leaving a stunning color in our year.
What shall we do with this great gift of time this year?
Let us begin by remembering whatever justice, whatever peace and wholeness might bloom in our world this year.
We are the hearts and minds, the hands and feet, the embodiment of all the best visions of our people.
The new year can be well for the safety of our dreams.
Let us take the step forward together onto new ground.
Bending our dreams well, faithfully, and enjoy.
If Summit is a valued community in your life, please support us by making an offering today. Our Zoomers at home are invited to contribute to our virtual plate. The link can be found in the chat box and will take you directly to the donation location. And we acknowledge our intrepid pledgers. Everyone keeps our doors open. Now we will gratefully accept your generous donations during the musical interlude.
Auld Lang Syne is written with the traditional Scottish tune, and the words by Robert Burns, and they will not be on your screen, but if you'd like to sing along, this song celebrates friendship, and feel free.
You really can't hear me? Because I can't hear myself. You can, good. I thank you for that tune. You may not know it, but I sang in Danish. And I always love when I can sing in Danish. Skulle gammel venskab rent forgå, aldrig brings to men. Yeah, it works. The title of today's sermon is The Pursuit of Happiness. And you noticed in your order of service that actually it's printed there. Now, I'm Danish, obviously. I can't run away from it, even if I wanted to. And people often come up to me once they hear that I'm from Denmark. And they say, oh, this research, or this study, or this global survey, or something has once again determined that Danes are among the happiest people in the world. They pay the most taxes of most people in the world, but they're satisfied. They like their government. They even trust the government, just imagine that. And they like their society. They like the amazing pastries. They like the preponderance of bicycles. And I'm sure all of that is true. And when people say that, I feel proud of my country and all that. But you know what? Here's my secret. Makes me feel like I'm an imposter. I'm an imposter. You see, I am not the happiest person in the world. And I think even if I lived in Denmark, I wouldn't be. I got some of that dark Hamlet gloom embedded deep in the recesses of my soul. And some days to be happy all the time, oh, that seems like just plain hard work. So how about the rest of you? How are you doing? Are you happy? Should that even be our goal? One of our Unitarian presidents, John Adams, wrote, upon this point, all speculative politicians will agree that the happiness of society is the end of government. Well, they ought to listen to that, shouldn't they? They haven't. But you know, no other country in the world has the pursuit of happiness written into its birth certificate. Do you realize how unusual that is? I mean, the Danish Constitution doesn't have that in there. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I first learned about it, of course, in school, elementary school, actually. And I thought, wow, America must be a marvelous country, and rather peculiar too. Because how can anyone control happiness? I did indeed grow up with one of those pondering dark souls. I have a very high set point for happiness. And so it seemed to me that happiness, if it was anything, was a sudden gift. It was an unexpected grace, but it wasn't anything I could control or anybody else could. You can sort of set the stage and lay the groundwork, but that's it. And I think maybe that's the trouble. We as a culture do a lot of heavy lifting, pursuing and chasing of this happiness we feel so absolutely entitled to. How are you doing in that department? Are you happy? Well, maybe you are, and that's wonderful. But what makes one person happy, of course, does not do it for another one. So another question I have is, what does happiness mean to you? Some of you may remember the pleasure-seeking, escapist character and the haunting tune in the old movie, What's It All About, Alfie? Some of you remember that one. What's it all about, Alfie? Is it just for the moment we live? Was he happy? Happiness all the time, my friends, is impossible. Honestly, it would be utterly boring. I can assure you. And then there's the human condition. We are always, it seems to me, saying farewell in this world, always standing on the edge of a loss, asking unanswerable questions. In between our first cry and our last breath, we string together precious moments of life as pearls in a string, and then sometime something or someone breaks the strand and the pearls scatter everywhere. And we fall on our knees on the floor, trying to retrieve something that was precious and is now lost. But we can gather together the precious memories, in deep gratitude for the time we did have together. Like the universalist, I refuse absolutely to believe that either God or the universe is cruel. That is an utterly human flaw. Instead, I trust that nothing is ever lost. All past and present makes up this very moment, all of you, all your experience. You come here and you're in this moment. So should we replace happiness with contentment or satisfaction? Oh, dear friends, forget that. Human nature is such, we always long for something more, something more. It's in our bones, it's in our very genes. We want to build, we want to move, we want to discover, we want to sail a ship across the ocean, we want to send a rocket to the moon and Mars. Our restless longing has given us so much beauty and variety, all of our different cultures, languages, science, and religion. But that same longing that lives in every one of us and propels us ever forward makes it much harder for us to be happy or grateful. I'm not saying you can't, but we have to work at it. It doesn't come naturally to us. But I tell you what comes naturally to us, complaining. I mean, it's addicted. It's an addictive bad habit. I confess, I complain too. I mean, I stand here and I'm going, that shoe doesn't feel so good. Maybe my nose itches. Maybe it's just a little bit too hot in here, etc., etc. Oh, and I have 40 pounds to lose. Let's not forget that one, right? How many of us walk around with that one? I'm a recovering perfectionist. I can find endless things that are wrong, especially with myself. And I tell you right now, there is no surer way to be ungrateful and internally unhappy than to demand perfection. Hell, if there is such a place, which of course I don't believe in as a good universalist, hell would be an otherwise lovely spot, let's say a beach in Hawaii, with unhappy perfectionists, worrying about how they look in a bikini and the sand is a little rough and it's just a little too warm, the water, isn't it? And oh, so much sun, how can I stand it? What's the antidote to complaining? And actually, according to science, what makes us feel happier, it's gratitude. Gratitude, yes. In my apartment, I have a ceramic plaque with a Danish proverb. A glad heart is good medicine. A glad heart is good medicine. So how do we develop gratitude? It doesn't come easy if we're not used to it. We practice it. That and a bit of rebellious, stubborn spirit is what it takes to get through this life. Hey, I know we'll all die. I'm sure I will one day. I don't know of any other way of getting out of this life. But I'd rather be dancing or at least laughing on the edge of my grave. The reason I chose the hymn we sang earlier is because it's an example of our human soul being capable of finding hope even in the very darkest of times. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow wrote the poem that we sang earlier. I heard the bells on Christmas Day in 1863. There was a civil war going on. He was a 57-year-old widower. He was a father of 6 children. His oldest son had joined the Union Army and was nearly paralyzed. His country was fighting a war against itself. And his response was a poem. It was a poem. He was trying to capture the dissonance, the dynamics in his own heart and the world around him. He had been in a deep depression. His wife of 18 years, Frances, died. She had been doing something as ordinary in those days as using sealing envelopes with wax when the flame caught onto her dress. And he jumped on her, of course, and tried to save her and did all he could, but she died the next day. And he himself, Bernd, was too ill to attend the funeral. Now, here's a guy who has a lot on his plate, I would say, an awful lot. His appearance changed. He started growing a beard. So when you see pictures of a Longfellow with this big white beard, well, that's because his face was scarred. And yet, somehow, he declared stubbornly, defiantly, that no, God, well, if you don't like the word God, call it something else. Joy, hope, love is not dead. It's not dead. Peace is still possible. It's an act of faith. There are good people in the world. Peace is possible despite all evidence to the contrary. So, how do we find the courage? How do we find the courage to do that? And Longfellow didn't do it by denying it. If I stood here and pretended, for example, that there wasn't a war in Ukraine, you'd think I was crazy, or silly, or whatever. No, he didn't deny his grief. He did not deny the horrors of the Civil War, but he chose to believe in spite of it. I love that kind of rebellious thinking. Defiance, courage, and an ability to laugh. Laughter literally takes our attention away from our reptilian brain, the amygdala. It helps us think, which is why I sometimes told Bert when I was still a full-time practicing minister, I would occasionally tell a very bad joke at a board meeting when it seemed like everybody had reverted to their reptilian brain, and I felt I was sitting there with a bunch of alligators, okay? So it does bring you out of that place. By the way, there's a proclaimed official World Laughter Day. It's May the 2nd. And you ought to have a service about fun around that time. There's also a Laughter Club International whose only purpose is to help people laugh. And on the website, there are pictures of Swedes laughing, Finns laughing, Saudi women laughing behind their veil, US executives in suits attending a motivating laughter workshop, probably better than the last one you attended, I bet. And then a picture Fonda City Hall in Copenhagen with, I don't know, 10,000s of Danes gathered to laugh together. The founder, Dr. Katai, had read Norman Cousins' book, laughter is the best medicine. So he decided we got to start a movement. So he gathered his friend in a Bombay park. And in the beginning, they told each other jokes. And then they ran out of jokes. So he decided we'll just laugh. So this is how you do it. First of all, you got to gather a bunch of people. And you have to all begin together, as if you were running a race. So the leader counts 1, 2, 3, and everyone takes a deep breath and begins saying, ho, ha, 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 while looking deeply into each other's eyes. And this soon turns into real laughter. And with practice, the group can go on for 20 minutes or so. Now I really love that. Imagine a presidential cabinet meeting that begins with 20 minutes of laughter. Imagine the Senate and Congress. Well, before we do anything today, we're going to do our 20 minutes of laughter. I really think the world would be better if we didn't take ourselves so desperately seriously. We live in this amazing and sometimes quite absurd universe. And in many cultures, the fool is the agent of the sacred. The texts tell us both how little we can actually control, but also with an appreciative laughter, help us love life. Despite it all. Is there a theology of happiness? Yes. It's called gratitude. What's the greatest enemy of happiness? It's fear of all kinds of things. But 2 big fears that we probably had since the Stone Age. And that is the fear of not having enough or of not being enough. And I think one reason that Denmark goes so high on the happiness list is simply that basic human needs are met and considered human rights. Housing, health, education, and a measure of equality. Time off too. I tell you, vacation is sacred there. And then you can pursue happiness. In this country, look to our streets. Look at the gap growing between the way too rich and the poor. And of course, the rank of the unhoused are growing. So, people are into money in this country. Oh boy, ever since the first people came here from Europe, into money. It's a happiness trap. They talk about hunting down the one big prize that will finally free them from the 2 basic fears. So which one do you fear most? Not having enough or not being enough? I am lucky. I'm fed, I'm housed. And so my fear is not being enough. And it's a deeply religious issue. So my gratitude toward the UU faith goes deep. It tells me that we humans are enough. No one can take the dignity and worth away from us. We are, in the eyes of the beloved community and in the eyes of the holy, by whatever name we call it, loved and welcome as we are. This world of love and beauty is ours to see, taste, smell, touch, and love. Dan Baker writes, "This is happiness, bittersweet, often broken, a poem sometimes left unspoken, full of longing and opportunity missed, made wise by sorrows that never last, a promise to ourselves from deep in the past, a future with fears that never arrives. This is happiness, this moment, this now, this being alive. Have a happy New Year. Godt nytår.
Thank you, Luna. So I didn't think I'd have a New Year's resolution, but I know what I'm going to resolve now. Laugh more often. Let's rise and sing Blue Boat Home, number 1064.
The closing words are from the Inuit. The great sea has set me in motion, set me adrift, moving me like a weed in the river. The sky and the strong wind have moved the spirit inside me till I am carried away, trembling with joy.
Thank you. A reminder that today, Mark Weidman is preparing the cafe in the salon. So everyone please join him and us over there after our community gathering, which will follow in just a moment after we sing our closing circle song. Oh.
I need to say it, so I need to say it.
Yes. We'll have our community gathering now. Are there any questions?